The US government just shut down, but this shutdown is very different from all previous shutdowns. The US economy is on the brink of catastrophe, and the government simply wants to distract you by shutting down the government right now because it does not want you to think about the real problem. The real problem is way bigger than most people imagine. In fact, nobody is even talking about this problem. Without solving it, the government simply won't be able to function. But before we get into that, let's find out why the government shut down in the first place. I would call this problem a BS problem. There is no other way to describe it. If you look at the US government, its fiscal year starts on the 1st of October until the 30th of December. Because the Democrats and the Republicans did not agree on a budget, the government is shutting down. In order to pass the budget, you need the White House, the Senate, and the House. So they passed the budget on the House, but in order to pass it in the Senate, you need a 60% majority, which Republicans don't have to, which is why they have to negotiate with Democrats. But Democrats have a few problems with the budget that the Republicans proposed. So basically, Democrats want to continue the subsidies that Joe Biden proposed back when he was president. And that is going to cost the government an extra $35 billion, or the exact same $35 billion that the government spent over the last couple of years. If they won't pass it, then premiums are going to rise for millions of Americans. And that's why Democrats are very strict about it. But Donald Trump is like, you know what? It's either going to be my way or highway. Either you're going to agree or I'm going to shut down the entire government, and I don't care how long it is going to last, even if that's going to harm you. I have all the cards. We, the Republicans, control the White House, the Senate, and the House. You have no leverage over us, which is why you have to agree on our terms. But Republicans are like, nah, we are not. You have to agree on this $35 billion. But you know what? This is a BS problem. This is not even the problem in the first place. If you look at the US government budget, it is divided into two categories, mandatory and discretionary. Mandatory is not touched by anybody because you need the supermajority in the Senate and the House, which nobody actually has at this moment. Under the mandatory, you have the Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and the interest payments on the debt, which make up the vast majority of the US budget. The discretionary budget is mostly military, education, and everything else. But the vast majority of the discretionary budget is the military. But the biggest problem with the budget is that we're not even making enough money in order to balance the budget in the first place. For example, last year the government ran almost $1.9 trillion deficit. And this is for 2024. If you take the numbers for 2025, this deficit has risen to almost $2 trillion. And according to every single estimate that we have, it is going to rise to further $2 trillion this year again, no matter how you look at it. And if the government won't be able to collect enough taxes after the tax cuts, then the probability that this deficit is going to further rise is increasingly high. So on one side, we have a $2 trillion deficit. On the other side, we are debating whether we can afford the $35 billion healthcare premiums for millions of Americans. Honestly, it doesn't actually make sense. Now, some people might say, well, we have to save every single penny that we can. Yes, $35 billion is not actually a lot of money, but if you save $30 billion there, $30 billion there, $40 billion there, over time, you are going to save hundreds of billions of dollars, and maybe that is going to slightly even help the budget. Unfortunately, if that was the truth, I would completely agree with you. But when you look at the facts, things are way worse than you can possibly imagine. Republicans want to increase the budget for defense, homeland security, and veteran affairs by $160 billion. The only question that I have in my mind is that the military budget right now is almost $850 billion, which is the largest military budget in history. And now you want to increase that budget by $113 billion, and you want to reduce the healthcare benefits by $35 billion. You also want to increase the homeland security budget by $42 billion. Do you see the problem? On one side, we are complaining about the $35 billion for healthcare. On the other side, you're like, how about raising the military budget by $160 billion? at the expense of who? Not only we are taking money from other agencies and throwing it into the military, but we're also getting into debt to further increase the military spending of the US government, which for me actually does not make any sense or whatsoever. I would completely understand if they also reduced the military budget to a certain extent, or at least they kept it the way it is, and then they would lower the budget for other government agencies. But in this case, they're doing the absolute opposite. Reduce $35 billion for healthcare and raise the military spending by $160 billion, which makes no sense, and it doesn't solve the main problem that the US has right now, which is why it is paying $1 trillion in interest payments right now. In fact, if you look at all the projections for the US government, you see that the interest payments are going to rise. For 2026, at least it is going to be $1 trillion in interest payments. And this is the projection that we have without considering how it is going to go further. Because another crisis could happen. Maybe the government is going to overspend further. Maybe the government is going to go through another crisis. So this number is easily going to rise to $1.2 trillion, $1.3 trillion. But overall, the peak that it's going to get to, it'll be $1.8 trillion by 2035. But I'm more than confident that this number is going to raise further. So on one side, we have $1 trillion interest payment. On the other side, instead of solving the real problem that we have over here, we are debating whether we should keep $35 billion for healthcare. Does that make sense to you? Like, think about it for a moment. We have an existential threat to the US government, which is $1 trillion in interest payment that is about to rise to $1.8 trillion. And we are debating $35 billion of healthcare expenses, and we are shutting the entire government for it. Now, let me tell you how big this crisis is. The US government recently passed a big beautiful bill to raise the debt ceiling to $41.1 trillion by raising it by an extra $5 trillion. The current debt is $37.5 trillion. So according to a lot of estimates, this ceiling is going to come to an end in the fall of 2026. So a year from now, the US government will have to raise the debt ceiling again, otherwise it can't actually keep spending. So do we shut the government again for this problem? What are we going to do with the next debt ceiling? So we have a serious problem literally a year from now because the interest payments are rising so fast. But instead of actually solving that problem, we're closing the government because we can't agree on a $35 billion healthcare problems. Like every single time the government will intervene and they will agree to raise the debt ceiling again because we can't afford not to have the government, which is why they will raise the debt ceiling. More debt will be borrowed by the US government. Probably this time it won't simply be by another $5 trillion. Most likely they're like, you know what, we want to delay this problem for another at least few years, so they will raise the debt ceiling probably by an extra $10 trillion or maybe even $12 trillion, and that more money will flow into the economy, creating higher inflation. Do you think because of the debt ceiling they're going to raise your wages? Most likely not. But you know what it's going to do for a fact is that it is going to raise inflation. And whenever we have inflation, no matter when it is or where it is, the first thing that are going to raise in value are asset prices, which is why you see that stock market has doubled over the last 5 years. This is probably one of the biggest increases in stock prices in the entire history of the stock market. And if they raise the debt ceiling by another $10 trillion next year, then you can literally see what is going to happen to the prices of stocks. On one side, the market is overvalued. On the other side, just by looking at what the government is doing and instead of solving the real problem that's in front of it, it's shutting the government for a $35 billion healthcare disagreement makes no sense, which is why there is a probability that this is going to continue rising. So if you haven't started investing yet, or you don't know which stocks you should be focusing on right now, or what are the top 5 stocks that you should be buying right now, then check out the first link in the description of this video and make sure that you are invested in these assets to protect yourself against the disaster that the US government is literally creating for itself. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.